Chapter 1. The Encounter on Nexus 7. Nexus 7 was no paradise. Nathan Grayson had seen many harsh worlds in his time as a prospector, but Nexus 7 stood out for its unforgiving hostility. The planet's landscape was an endless sea of jagged, obsidian spires stretching toward an ochre sky choked with storms. Electrical flashes streaked the atmosphere, illuminating the barren plains below. The air carried a sulfuric tang that burned the throat if inhaled too deeply, and every living thing on this forsaken rock was either hidden or predatory. Nathan adjusted the straps of his reinforced backpack, his boots crunching over the glassy gravel as he navigated the uneven terrain. The small anti-grav sled trailing behind him hummed softly, its cargo compartment laden with rare mineral samples and a few salvaged relics from an old mining facility. It wasn't the most lucrative haul, but it would keep him going for another month. The wind picked up, carrying a sharp chill as dusk approached. Nathan pulled his scarf tighter around his neck and checked his wrist console. His shelter wasn't far another hour's hike, maybe less if he avoided the narrow canyons prone to flash floods. But even as he plotted the safest route, a sound stopped him in his tracks. A low, guttural growl echoed faintly across the rocky expanse. Nathan froze, his senses on high alert. The predators of Nexus 7 were as cunning as they were vicious, and he'd heard enough horror stories from other prospectors to know better than to let his guard down. He gripped his plasma rifle tightly, his gloved fingers brushing against the trigger as he scanned the area. Then came another sound, a whimper. This time it wasn't menacing. It was pained, almost pitiable. It tugged at something deep within Nathan, overriding his survival instincts. He frowned, his gaze narrowing as he tried to pinpoint the source. Probably just bait, he muttered to himself. Lure you in, then attack from the shadows. Still, curiosity got the better of him. Against his better judgment, Nathan began moving cautiously toward the noise, keeping his rifle raised and his steps as quiet as possible. The sounds grew louder as he approached, leading him to a narrow canyon carved out by centuries of wind and acid rain. The jagged walls loomed high above, casting long shadows that danced with the flickering light of distant storms. Nathan crept closer, peering around a large boulder at the canyon's mouth. What he saw made him inhale sharply. A massive creature lay sprawled in the dust, its sleek, black and silver fur matted with dirt and blood. It resembled a terrestrial leopard, but with a lithe, otherworldly elegance. Its elongated limbs were tipped with razor-sharp claws, and its eyes closed now were set in a regal, feline face. Strange, bioluminescent markings pulsed faintly along its sides, their rhythm sluggish and erratic, as if reflecting the creature's weakened state. Nathan's first thought was to back away. This was an apex predator, one of the legendary Drax's leopards native to Nexus 7. He'd heard stories of these creatures taking down entire prospecting teams, their intelligence and agility making them nearly impossible to outmaneuver. Yet, this one was far from a threat. Its ribs jutted out sharply beneath its fur, and its breathing was shallow and labored. A deep gash ran along its flank, oozing dark, viscous blood that pooled beneath it. Its long tail twitched feebly, a stark contrast to the creature's otherwise motionless form. Nathan cursed under his breath. He knew the smart thing to do was walk away, leave it to its fate, and ensure his own safety. But something about the sight stirred an uncomfortable pang of sympathy in him. He'd been on the brink of death himself once, stranded on a hostile moon after a failed salvage mission. If it hadn't been for a passing freighter captain who'd taken pity on him, he wouldn't be alive today. This is stupid, he muttered, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Really stupid. Nathan approached slowly, his every instinct screaming at him to turn back. The leopard stirred faintly, its bioluminescent markings flaring weakly as it opened one eye. The amber glow of its gaze locked onto Nathan, and a low growl rumbled in its throat. Easy, Nathan said, his voice calm but firm. I'm not here to hurt you. The leopard's growl faltered, as if it lacked the strength to sustain even that small show of defiance. It lowered its head back to the ground, its breathing ragged. Nathan took this as an opportunity to examine the wound more closely. The gash was deep, likely inflicted by another predator. Infection had already set in, and the surrounding flesh was swollen and discolored. Without intervention, the leopard wouldn't survive the night. Nathan hesitated. Helping this creature would be risky. It could easily turn on him the moment it regained its strength, but leaving it to die felt wrong. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling a medkit from his pack. "You better not make me regret this." He knelt beside the leopard, moving slowly to avoid startling it. The creature flinched as he reached for the wound, its claws scraping against the ground, but it didn't attack. Nathan worked quickly, cleaning the injury with antiseptic foam and applying a biosealant to stem the bleeding. The leopard's muscles tensed with each touch, but it didn't resist. As he worked, Nathan couldn't help but marvel at the creature's beauty. Up close, its fur shimmered like liquid metal, and its bioluminescent markings pulsed faintly in intricate patterns. He wondered if those markings had some deeper meaning, a form of communication, perhaps, or a reflection of its emotional state. "There," he said after finishing the treatment, "that's the best I can do. The rest is up to you." Nathan rose to his feet, stepping back to give the leopard space. It regarded him with half-lidded eyes, its gaze filled with something that almost resembled curiosity. Then, to his surprise, it let out a soft, rumbling sound, not a growl, but something closer to a purr. "You're welcome," Nathan said with a faint smile. "Now get some rest. I'll check on you tomorrow." He left a small ration pack beside the leopard, knowing it likely wouldn't touch the food until he was gone. Then, with one last glance, he turned and made his way back to his shelter, the weight of his decision pressing heavily on his mind. When he reached the canyon, the leopard was gone. The blood-stained ground and the empty ration pack were the only signs it had ever been there. Nathan sighed, a mixture of relief and disappointment washing over him. "Good luck out there," he said softly, turning to leave. As he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from over. Chapter 2. A Strange Reunion. Years had passed since Nathan's encounter with the Drax's leopard on Nexus 7, but the memory remained vivid. He'd often wonder about the creature, whether it had survived, whether it had even understood his gesture of kindness. Life on Nexus 7 had carried on as usual, though the barren planet had become quieter over time as more prospectors abandoned it for more lucrative systems. Nathan stayed, his modest lifestyle unchanged. He liked the solitude, the simplicity of eking out a living on his own terms. The mining ruins still yielded enough resources to keep him going, and his small, reinforced shelter was a sanctuary from the planet's storms. One morning, Nathan stood outside his shelter, sipping a steaming cup of ration-brewed tea. The dawn cast long shadows over the jagged landscape, painting the obsidian spires in hues of crimson and gold. It was a rare moment of peace on Nexus 7. The peace shattered with the sound of movement and unnatural rustling among the rocks. Nathan froze, his instincts kicking in. He reached for his plasma rifle, scanning the horizon. The predators on Nexus 7 rarely approached this close to his shelter unless they were desperate, and desperate meant dangerous. Then he saw it, a sleek, familiar figure emerging from the shadows. It was her. The Drax's leopard stood at the edge of the rocky outcrop, her silver and black fur shimmering faintly in the dawn light. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed steadily, their rhythm stronger and healthier than Nathan remembered. She was larger now, her presence even more commanding, but her movements were cautious as she approached. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen another Drax's leopard since that day in the canyon. He'd assumed she was long gone, killed by the harsh environment or another predator. Yet here she was, standing before him as if no time had passed. "Is it really you?" Nathan murmured, lowering his rifle slowly. He wasn't sure if he was imagining things, but her markings seemed to flicker in response, as though acknowledging his voice. The leopard stepped closer, her gaze locked onto his. Nathan remained still, letting her close the distance on her terms. Her powerful frame moved with a fluid grace, and when she stopped a few feet away, he could see her bioluminescent markings more clearly. They were brighter than before, and he noticed something new, faint patterns along her sides that hadn't been there years ago. "Wait," Nathan said softly, his eyes widening. "Are you Dash?" Before he could finish, the leopard turned her head, emitting a low, rumbling sound that echoed through the still morning air. From the shadows behind her, smaller figures emerged. Nathan's jaw dropped as 3 cubs bounded into view, their movements clumsy and playful. They were miniature versions of their mother, their fur a blend of black and silver with faint bioluminescent markings that pulsed erratically. One of the cubs tripped over its own paws, letting out a squeaky chirp as it tumbled onto its side. The others paused, looking back at their sibling before continuing forward. The mother leopard watched Nathan carefully, her body language calm but alert. She nudged one of the cubs forward with her nose, as if encouraging it. The cub hesitated, then took a tentative step toward Nathan, its amber eyes wide with curiosity. Nathan crouched slowly, setting his rifle aside. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, a smile breaking across his face. "You brought me your kids?" The cub sniffed the air, its tiny markings flickering with what Nathan could only describe as excitement. It let out a high-pitched chirp before taking another step closer, its siblings following suit. Soon, all three cubs were in front of him, their mother standing watch a few paces away. Nathan extended a hand, letting the closest cub sniff his glove. It nuzzled his fingers tentatively, then let out a soft purr-like sound. The other two joined in, one playfully pawing at his boot, while the third tried to climb onto his knee. "You've got some bold little ones here," Nathan said, laughing softly. He glanced up at the mother leopard, who was now lying down, her gaze steady and calm. "And you trust me, don't you?" Her markings pulsed rhythmically, and though she made no sound, Nathan felt an unspoken understanding pass between them. Over the next few days, the leopard stayed near Nathan's shelter. The mother often disappeared during the day, presumably to hunt, but the cubs remained, their antics bringing unexpected joy to Nathan's otherwise solitary life. They tumbled over each other in mock battles, chased after stray rocks, and occasionally tried to pounce on Nathan's boots. Their playfulness was infectious, and Nathan found himself laughing more than he had in years. At night, the mother leopard returned, always watching over her cubs as they curled up in a pile near Nathan's shelter. She remained distant but attentive, her bioluminescent markings a soft glow in the dark. Nathan couldn't help but wonder why she had chosen to bring her cubs to him. Was it gratitude for saving her all those years ago? Or was there something deeper in instinct, perhaps, that told her he could be trusted? One evening, as the leopards rested near the fire Nathan had built, he decided to test a theory. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small, polished stone trinket he'd found in the ruins during one of his prospecting trips. It had no real value, but its smooth surface and faint glow reminded him of the leopard's markings. He held the stone out to the mother leopard, who tilted her head curiously. After a moment, she leaned forward and sniffed it, her nose brushing against his hand. Then, to Nathan's surprise, she took the stone gently in her jaws and placed it in front of her cubs. The cubs pounced on it immediately, their playful chirps filling the air. Nathan watched, a sense of wonder settling over him. "You really are incredible," he said softly, looking at the mother leopard. "I don't know why you picked me, but I'm glad you did." The leopard's markings pulsed in response, their glow brightening briefly before fading into a steady rhythm. Chapter 3. A Guardian's Role. Nathan's once quiet life on Nexus 7 had transformed into something he could only describe as extraordinary. The Drax's leopard and her cubs had become a constant presence around his shelter, filling the barren landscape with a vitality he hadn't realized he'd been missing. The cubs' playful antics brought laughter to his days, and the mother's silent, watchful companionship gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. But with the joy came new challenges. Caring for a trio of rapidly growing alien cubs wasn't exactly in the prospector's handbook, and while their mother did her part, Nathan found himself adapting to his new role as a surrogate guardian. One morning, as the twin sons of Nexus 7 cast their light over the rocky plains, Nathan stood outside his shelter, watching the cubs wrestle over a piece of scrap metal they discovered. The smallest of the three, runt with a knack for getting into trouble, was chirping indignantly as its larger siblings ganged up on it. "Hey, cut it out," Nathan called, stepping forward. The larger cubs froze, their amber eyes wide as they dropped the metal shard and slinked away, tails flicking guiltily. Nathan crouched down, scooping up the runt, which nuzzled his chest with a soft purr. "You're gonna have to learn to stand up for yourself, little one," he said with a chuckle, scratching behind the cub's ear. Its bioluminescent markings flickered in response, a sign of contentment. The mother leopard watched from a distance, her regal form silhouetted against the jagged horizon. Though she rarely interacted directly with Nathan, her presence was a constant reminder of the trust she placed in him. He often wondered what had driven her to bring her cubs to him. Was it gratitude, instinct, or something deeper, something he couldn't yet comprehend? That afternoon, while Nathan was repairing a solar panel on the roof of his shelter, he noticed the mother leopard standing at the edge of the rocky outcrop, her body tense and her ears swiveling. She let out a low growl, and the cubs, who had been playing nearby, immediately darted into the shelter. Nathan frowned, climbing down quickly. He grabbed his plasma rifle and scanned the horizon. "What is it?" he muttered, more to himself than to her. The answer came in the form of movement shadows shifting in the distance. Nathan adjusted the scope on his rifle, his heart sinking as he spotted the source of her alarm. A pack of Zarnhounds was approaching. These predators were smaller than Drax's leopards, but no less dangerous, their numbers making them a formidable threat. Their sleek, reptilian forms moved with eerie coordination, and their glowing, crimson eyes locked onto the leopard. Nathan's grip on his rifle tightened. "Great. Just what we need." The mother leopard growled again, her bioluminescent markings flaring brightly as she positioned herself between the hounds and the shelter. Despite her size and strength, Nathan could see the odds weren't in her favor. There were at least 6 hounds, and they were closing in fast. "Stay with the cubs," Nathan said, his voice firm as he stepped forward. The leopard turned her head, her amber eyes meeting his. For a moment, it seemed as though she was trying to convey something unspoken but deeply understood. Then, with a sharp exhale, she turned back to face the hounds, her muscles coiled like a spring. "Damn it," Nathan muttered. He wasn't about to let her fight alone. The battle was fierce and chaotic. The Zarn hounds moved like a swarm, their shrill cries echoing across the plains as they lunged at the leopard. She met them head-on, her claws flashing in the sunlight as she struck with precision and power. Nathan fired his rifle, each plasma bolt finding its mark, but the hounds were relentless. One of the hounds broke off from the pack, circling toward the shelter. Nathan's stomach dropped as he realized it was targeting the cubs. He sprinted toward the creature, firing a shot that grazed its side. The hound let out a screech and turned on him, its jaws snapping dangerously close to his leg. Nathan swung the butt of his rifle, striking the hound square in the jaw. It yelped and staggered back, giving him just enough time to line up another shot. The plasma bolt hit its mark, and the hound collapsed in a heap. "Stay inside," Nathan shouted toward the shelter, hoping the cubs would heed his words. Meanwhile, the mother leopard was locked in a deadly dance with the remaining hounds. Her movements were a blur of strength and grace, but even she was beginning to tire. Blood streaked her fur, and her breathing was labored. Nathan fired at one of the hounds lunging for her flank, the shot taking it down. "Come on," he muttered, aiming at another. "Just a little more." The final hound hesitated, its crimson eyes darting between Nathan and the leopard. Then, with a low growl, it turned and bolted into the distance, leaving its fallen packmates behind. Nathan lowered his rifle, his chest heaving as he took in the aftermath. The ground was littered with the bodies of the hounds, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of plasma burns. The mother leopard stood amidst the carnage, her bioluminescent markings flickering weakly. "You okay?" Nathan asked, approaching her cautiously. She let out a low rumble, not quite a growl, but not a purr either. Her amber eyes met his, and he could see the exhaustion in her gaze. "You did good," he said softly. "Let's get you patched up." That evening, Nathan tended to her wounds while the cubs huddled nearby, their tiny markings dim with worry. The mother leopard allowed him to work, her body still but tense. Nathan spoke to her as he cleaned and bandaged the injuries, his voice low and steady. "You're one tough lady," he said, wrapping a strip of fabric around her leg. "But you can't take on the whole planet by yourself. Good thing you've got me, huh?" She blinked slowly, her markings pulsing faintly. Nathan liked to think it was her way of agreeing. As the night wore on, the cubs curled up beside their mother, their tiny bodies pressed against hers. Nathan sat nearby, his rifle within arm's reach, keeping watch as they all drifted into an uneasy sleep. Chapter 4. A Legacy of Trust. Nathan woke to the faint sound of chirping. The first rays of sunlight pierced the thick clouds above Nexus 7, casting an otherworldly glow across the barren landscape. He sat up slowly, his back aching from sleeping on the rocky ground outside his shelter. The cubs were already awake, tumbling over one another in a chaotic display of energy that brought a rare smile to his face. The mother leopard lay nearby, her regal form silhouetted against the jagged horizon. Her wounds, though still fresh, looked better after Nathan's care the night before. She watched her cubs with a mixture of vigilance and calm, her bioluminescent markings pulsing faintly in time with their movements. "Morning," Nathan said softly, stretching as he rose to his feet. The leopard turned her head to regard him, her amber eyes reflecting the morning light. There was a depth to her gaze, an intelligence that Nathan had come to respect more than he'd expected. As he moved to check the perimeter, his thoughts drifted to the events of the previous day. The Zarn Hound attack had been a stark reminder of the dangers lurking on Nexus 7. While he and the mother leopard had driven them off, it was clear that their safety was only temporary. The cubs were growing, but they weren't ready to face such threats on their own. Nathan glanced back at the shelter, watching the cubs as they play-fought near their mother's side. "They're going to need more than luck to survive this place," he muttered. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Nathan set to work reinforcing his shelter, expanding it to include a safe enclosure for the cubs. He scavenged additional materials from nearby ruins, fashioning sturdy barriers that would keep out even the most persistent predators. The mother leopard watched him closely during these efforts, often helping in her own way by scouting the area and warning him of approaching dangers. Training the cubs became a daily routine. Nathan worked with them, teaching them to recognize threats and encouraging their natural instincts. He used mock traps and obstacles to help them hone their agility, and he introduced them to basic survival tactics, such as finding shelter during storms. At first, the cubs were more interested in turning everything into a game, but as the days went on, they began to take the lessons seriously. The smallest cub, the runt, was the most eager to learn, often mimicking Nathan's movements with surprising accuracy. "You've got the heart of a fighter, little one," Nathan said one afternoon, scratching the cub behind its ear. The cub chirped happily, its bioluminescent markings glowing brightly. The mother leopard, observing from a distance, let out a low rumble of approval. As the cubs grew stronger, so did their bond with Nathan. The once wild creatures now saw him as part of their pack, following him wherever he went and responding to his commands. The mother leopard, though still reserved, showed increasing signs of trust. She often joined Nathan on his scavenging runs, her presence a formidable deterrent to any predators they encountered. One evening, as Nathan sat by the fire outside his shelter, the mother leopard approached him. She carried something in her jaws, a smooth, black stone etched with glowing, faintly blue patterns. Nathan recognized it as a rare mineral unique to Nexus 7, one he had only seen a few times during his years of prospecting. The leopard placed the stone at Nathan's feet, her amber eyes meeting his. "For me?" Nathan asked, picking up the stone. He turned it over in his hands, marveling at its intricate patterns. "What's this for?" The leopard sat down, her markings pulsing softly. Nathan liked to think it was her way of expressing gratitude, though he couldn't be sure. Still, the gesture filled him with a strange warmth. "Thanks," he said, placing the stone on the ground beside him. "I'll treasure it." The cubs, sensing the moment, bounded over to join them. They curled up beside Nathan, their small bodies radiating warmth as they purred softly. The mother leopard lay down nearby, her watchful gaze scanning the horizon even as she rested. For the first time in years, Nathan felt a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he was missing. These creatures had become more than just companions, they were his family. The day eventually came when Nathan knew it was time to let them go. The cubs were no longer the tiny, playful creatures they had once been. They had grown into sleek, powerful predators, their bioluminescent markings glowing brightly with health and vitality. Under their mother's guidance and Nathan's, they had learned to hunt, navigate the treacherous terrain of Nexus 7, and defend themselves against any threat. Nathan stood outside his shelter, watching as the mother leopard led the cubs to the edge of the rocky outcrop. She turned to look at him one last time, her amber eyes meeting his with an intensity that spoke volumes. "You'll be all right out there," Nathan said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "You're ready." The mother leopard rumbled softly, her markings pulsing in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Then, with a graceful leap, she disappeared over the ridge, her cubs following close behind. Nathan watched them go, a mixture of pride and sadness washing over him. The rocky plains seemed emptier without their presence, but he knew this was how it had to be. They belonged to the wild, and he had been fortunate to share their journey for as long as he had. As the sun set over Nexus 7, casting the landscape in hues of crimson and gold, Nathan returned to his shelter. On his desk sat the black stone the mother leopard had given him, its faint blue patterns glowing softly in the dim light. He placed a hand on it, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Good luck out there," he said quietly. And though the leopards were gone, Nathan knew he would carry their legacy with him, always a reminder that even in the harshest places, trust, loyalty, and love could flourish.